With our signatures today, we will formally declare the intention of our three countries to replace NAFTA with the USMCA. The USMCA is the largest, most significant, modern, and balanced trade agreement in history. All of our countries will benefit greatly. It is probably the largest trade deal ever made also. In the United States, the new trade pact will support high-paying manufacturing jobs and promote greater access for American exports across the range of sectors, including our farming, manufacturing, and service industries. New measures to ensure fair competition and promote high wages and higher wages for U.S. and North American auto workers. The auto workers are a tremendous beneficiary. And this is an agreement that, first and foremost, benefits working people.
I mean, who can blame them if they made these great deals with the United States, took advantage of the United States on manufacturing, on just about everything, every aspect that you could imagine they took advantage of. I look at some of these agreements, I'd read them at night, and I'd say, who would ever sign a thing like this?
It's been a long time. Everybody said this was a deal that could not be done. Too complicated, too big, couldn't be done. We got it done. And today we're finally ending the NAFTA nightmare and signing into law the brand new U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. Very special. Very, very special.
He was lying then, didn't know what he was talking about then. He's lying now, doesn't know what he's talking about now. Those are your options. Those are your only options. Greetings from Arizona, from this Canadian in Arizona. In this video, I'm going to be talking about Trump's many, many lies and one truth when it comes to talking about the trade war with Canada and his nonsensical justifications for this unwarranted and unprovoked conflict, starting with dairy. Donald has falsely said that Canada is tariffing American dairy at roughly 250% flat out wrong. Wrong. Here's the actual truth. Canada has a supply management policy when it comes to our dairy industry. Like any other country, Canada needs to ensure that it is dairy independent. Why? I don't know. Maybe some tyrannical, lying, aggressive, unprovoked leader from your best friend nation might come over and exploit your vulnerabilities to try and bully you into doing things you don't want to do, or something weird and theoretical like that. Every country needs to be independent when it comes to food to the greatest degree possible. That is what Canada is doing, and it does this in a few ways. The first thing is it actually pays its own farmers to not produce milk and dairy products above a certain amount so as to maintain price points that are competitive and make it worthwhile for other milk farmers to stay in business, and to also just to make sure that a small number of Canadian dairy producers don't outcompete all the others and then corner the market, and so they can start jacking up prices and so forth. That's one set of things that the Canadian government does, is it incentivizes our farmers to not produce too much milk any one year. The second thing is it sets a ceiling below which American dairy exporters to Canada, they will pay zero in tariffs below this threshold, which is so high that no American dairy producer has ever come close to touching it. That is, no American dairy farmer under the current system has ever paid a nickel in tariff. Now, if they do get to that point, yeah, the tariff's about 240-ish%. They've never gotten to it because it's so high. And it makes total sense that Canada would do this, in addition to the reasons I just said about not wanting to flood the market to suppress the price of milk and make it hard for a plurality of dairy farmers to stay in business. The Canadian government does not subsidize its dairy farmers to produce. It actually subsidizes them not to produce, as opposed to in America, they are subsidized by the American government in the form of the American government buys unsold product. So they have no disincentive to not produce, because there's no risk to it. It will be bought by the government. So they can do this, and then they can come and, if there's nothing restricting them, they can flood out the Canadian dairy market, which would harm our country and our dairy producers. It is a very fair tariff that has never been applied. And if it's such a bad deal, it was part of USMCA. Donald was the one that signed it. Donald was the one that said it was the best deal ever. So Donald, if you've got a problem, take it up with Donald. So that's milk, and that's dairy. Next, let's talk about lumber. Donald claimed that Canada is tariffing American lumber. That only just started as a retaliatory tariff against his own tariffs on Canada. You go back to January, there was no tariff. But you know where there was a tariff? America, tariffing Canadian lumber. Since Donald's first term, he put a tariff on Canadian softwood lumber. Now, why did he do that? Pretty good reason. The Canadian government subsidizes our lumber industry, but the American government does not subsidize theirs. As a result, the Canadian lumber industry has an unfair advantage over their American counterparts. And so Donald put that tariff in, at least in part, to level the playing field. If that justification sounds familiar to you, it's because it's pretty much identical with the exact situation with milk, but with the directionality flipped. If you are American and if you are okay with Donald's tariffs on lumber from Canada, you have to be in favor of what Canada is doing because it is based on the exact same justification and it is far less severe. The next lie. Donald claims that America is subsidizing Canada to the tune of $100 to $200 billion a year. Nope. So here's the thing. What he's talking about is the trade deficit. All that means that America has a trade deficit with Canada is that American people, companies, and government agencies are buying more from Canada than the other way around, which should surprise nobody given that America has a population 9 times bigger and the average American has more money than the average Canadian to spend, and the American government has more money than the Canadian government. This should not be remotely surprising. But here's the thing. That trade deficit, first off, his figures are way off. Not $100 to $200 billion, more like $36 to $45 billion. Way different. Second off, that is only when you include crude oil, which Canada sells to America at a substantial market discount, not because we're nice, but because up until very recently, we did not have the pipelines to get it out to anybody but Americans. Now we've got a small amount of pipelines going from the Alberta to the West Coast. So we're going to be able to start selling to Asia, and hopefully we build some more pipelines that way. We've got nothing going east. Hopefully we make that because America has put us in a situation now where we have to diversify who we sell to. And so basically Black Friday will be coming to an end for you guys. These Black Friday crude oil discounts will eventually be ending. But I don't want to be portraying Canada as any kind of a victim here because we do benefit. Selling it to America at a discount, yes, but then we buy it back from them because they use their more numerous LNG refineries to make it useful, and then we buy that back. Now we need to make our own LNG, more of them, and we're going to because you guys have incentivized us to. But that has helped us, and we also haven't had to make the pipelines. But basically, it's a symbiotic relationship, and America is absolutely coming out ahead for it. But if you take that out of the equation, despite us being 1/9 the size of the population and having less money at the level of individual and government, Canadians actually do buy more from America than the other way around. So Donald can stop playing the victim on that front.
We're not treated well by Canada, and we have to be treated well. Banks are not, as an example, allowed. Did you know that? That banks, American banks, are not allowed to do business in Canada. Can you believe that?
False. Brazenly false. There are 16 American banks operating in Canada. Citibank has been in Canada for over 100 years. These banks are collectively managing over $100 billion in assets. There is absolutely nothing impeding American banks from starting in Canada that are not equally impeding new Canadian banks from starting in Canada. American banks have not been getting into Canadian retail bank, the reason being that Canada has much stricter regulations on retail banking. And that probably is part of the reason why we didn't get hit so hard with the 2008 financial crisis. We have much stricter regulations, and that has served to discourage American banks from getting into the Canadian retail banking scene. But every one of those regulations applies just as much to any bank in Canada. There is nothing stopping American banks that isn't stopping Canadian banks. Lies. But as everyone knows, the trade deficit is not the only, and it wasn't even the first justification Donald used to justify tariffing Canada. He started off by saying it was a fentanyl drug, illegal immigrant, and border security issue. He said that Canada is responsible for a great amount of the fentanyl problem in America, which is utterly false. Per the US Customs and Border Protection Agency, fentanyl coming from the northern US border accounts for only 0.2% of all fentanyl seizures. Per the best data America has, Canada is literally 99.8% not at fault. And really, I should say that Canada is 99.9% not at fault, as it is a shared border. So why is Canada 100% responsible for something that is literally 50-50 by law? But let's, just for the sake of argument, simply accept Donald's blame Canada framing. Okay, fine. There are far more illegal drugs coming into Canada from the US than the other way around, most notably methamphetamine, cocaine, as well as fentanyl. On top of that, illegal guns being smuggled from the US to Canada has been linked to an uptick in Canadian gun crime and gun violence. So, by Donald's own logic, the bigger problem is 100% America's fault. Maybe it's time then for the US to get its shit together. Maybe the US should be on the hot seat on this one, huh? And things are much the same on the illegal immigration front. Of the approximately 1.6 million US Border Patrol encounters with migrants at places other than legal ports of entry, just 23,721, or about 1.5%, were from the northern border. And I've been searching for figures, but I haven't been able to come across anything that I found compelling. But it's actually quite possible that there might be more illegal immigrants coming from America to Canada than the other way around. Several years ago, this was a major issue of interest to Canadian conservatives, citing places like Roxham Road, where thousands of illegal entries of asylum seekers were happening. So by Donald's standards, every one of these is all America's fault. And as Howard Lutnick recently said, he said, I think that if Canada solves the fentanyl problem, then the tariffs will stop, which is an unwinnable, unreachable standard. You cannot stop it altogether. It's not like we've ever managed to stop murder or stop theft. We've never stopped anything perfectly. So it's an unreachable standard, but if we want to apply it, we should apply it fairly and equally, which means that America will never live up to the standards that their leaders are setting because they're ridiculous. So it's clear that both fentanyl and illegal immigration as justifications for these tariffs utterly fall flat. But then the question is, why is he making this about those two issues in the first place and border security? The reason is actually really straightforward and simple. He wanted to be able to declare a state of national emergency. The reason being is the Emergency Economics Powers Act of 1977, which states that if a state of national emergency is declared, the president has wide latitude to implement economic tariffs and sanctions unilaterally. That is, he does not have to get the approval of Congress, Senate, or anyone. Kind of like a king. And this, by the way, is why some Canadian conservatives who've been blaming Trudeau and the Liberal Party for the tariffs are flat out wrong. This is why it didn't matter that the Trudeau Liberals had significantly increased border staffing, introduced Black Hawk helicopters, and committed to investing a further $1.3 billion on border security. This is why it didn't matter that the opposition party Conservatives have also been fully in favor of directly addressing every one of Trump's stated concerns. In fact, not only that, they've been campaigning on many of these issues since before he even mentioned them. There was never anything our representatives could have done with respect to drugs, immigration, or borders, because it was never about these things in the first place. Nothing short of Canada signing annexation papers or giving free oil forever would have stopped this train. But there is one thing that Donald has been correct about. Canada has been free riding when it comes to security, primarily on America. We have let our military languish. Like several other NATO members, we have not lived up to our financial responsibilities of 2%. These are things that Canada absolutely deserves to be held responsible for and to be pressured in material ways to address immediately. Point granted. So that wraps up this video. In my next planned video, I am going to be talking to Canadians in advance of our upcoming election. What I'm going to be encouraging is for unity and for clean, honest campaigning and clean, honest advocacy on the behalf of citizens for the candidates they choose. The most important part of this is going to be holding the candidates and the people that support the candidates that we support accountable and encourage them and call them out when they are not being honest or fair or when they are being toxic. It is very easy to criticize people on the other side for doing this, but it carries more weight and it shows more integrity when we hold our own accountable. So if you are a liberal, please do me a favor. When you see lies and dishonesty and toxicity from people on your side, please call it out and say, we do not need this right now. At the end of this election, whichever way it goes, we need to be able to work with those people. And people on my side who are favoring Pierre Poilievre, please do the same. Please expect honesty and expect integrity from the people that are on your side. Because if you are going to expect it from the other side, you have to expect it from yours. We have to expect it from ours. Let's have this next election. Let's do it right. Let's do it honestly, because when it's over, we have to work together for something that is much more important than anything that we were squabbling over prior to this unnecessary conflict. Thank you very much.